Our agenda, we're going to first take a look at the evolution of Windows design.
Windows 11 Fluent UI, styles and effects, updating your GUI. I am Jim McKeith, Chief Developer Advocate for Embarcadero Technologies, and I will be your host today. Our agenda, we're going to first take a look at the evolution of Windows design, dive into Fluent UI, specifically what's new in Windows 11. We'll include some examples with code and also link you to libraries, resources, and more to learn. So, history lesson, we're going to go through the 5 eras of Windows UI, starting with Windows Classic. This is maybe pre-classic, if you will. This is the Windows 3.1.1, which was very simple outlines, very few colors. It was 16 color to 256 color display, so not the millions of colors we have today. Very, very simple. Then Windows 95, Windows introduced shaded bevels for slight 3D. Windows 98 is actually what you see there with the gradient in the title bar. In Windows 95, the title bar was a solid color. Luna, which was introduced with Windows XP, introduced these gradients for more 3D look. So it has that more of a 3D rounded look through the gradients there. And Arrow is what came with Windows Vista. I really liked Arrow, the sheet of glass, the translucency, transparency, glass effects. Really, really nice. I thought looked really good. Unfortunately, it was very demanding on computer hardware, and a number of other issues with Vista made it not a big hit. Metro is another one that I really liked. Did receive a lot of criticism, but everybody moved towards this flat primary colors design that Metro made popular. What everybody else is on Google and Apple using as well. Metro was also popular on the Windows Phone, and I think they used it on the Xbox 360. Whereas, so as far as Fluent designs, Metro design language was popularized in Windows 8 and Windows 8.1. It served as the basis for Fluent design. So Fluent design was introduced in Windows 10 and also Xbox One, and it is kind of the evolution of all of these. It's a revamp of Metro design language, and the transition in the operating system is a long-term transition. If you look at Windows, you'll notice there's still things that are using older design languages. So as far as comparing Fluent versus Metro versus Arrow, Fluent preserves the clean look and feel of Metro, that kind of flat-esque, the simple primary colors and such. It doesn't have the gradients that give it that 3D look, that the skeuomorphic look that was really popular previously. But it's not quite as flat as Metro. It also brings back the visuals the Arrow had, the blurred translucency, drop shadows, highlighting effects following the mouse pointer. So these are things that I thought were really good in the past, but it's being brought back in kind of a lighter weight, so it's not quite as ostentatious, if you will. Now, Windows 10 Fluent key principles were light, depth, motion, material, and scale. That's changed in Windows 11. Windows 11 design principles, and these are kind of the UX, if you will, the UX principles, the effortless, calm, personal, familiar, complete, and coherent. Now, if you're not a UX designer, you might be looking at this thinking, I don't know how to do anything with that. That's okay. So the signature experiences, and this is what we're going to dive into in a little more detail for Windows 11, are geometry, layering and elevation, color, material, iconography, typography, and motion. The typography is the Segio, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, Segio UI font. Should be your default font and everything. A little story, when I first started, well, one of the first jobs I had as a software developer was back in Windows XP era, I think it was. Well, I had a software developer. A job I had as a software developer, I was working in one place, and the developer that was built the application before I got there loved using a different font in each form of the application. He just did, oh, this is a great looking font. Let's use this one. Uh, use consistent fonts. Sego UI is a great font to use. We're not going to really dive into motion, but generally the idea behind motion is that you should use motion not ostentatiously, but instead to show where things came from, to show the relationship. And so, like if a user clicks on something, that thing gets bigger, for example, or expands or opens up. Those are the kinds of things you'd want to use with motion. So, geometry. First thing, really big, obviously noticeable, is the rounded corners, but also geometry includes the anything about the shape, size, and position of UI elements on the screen. So we have nested elements and consistent gutters. I'm including links down there, and you'll have access to the slides as well, so you can grab these later. So rounded corners apply in a few different places in a few different ways. There's actually an API call to for two different types of rounded corners, or small rounded and regular rounded, which we'll show in a second. But you'll notice that the buttons are rounded as well as the corners of the windows, the corners of the forms. It also applies to list views, which should be rounded as well. So those are the large rounded. The normal rounded is the 8 pixel, which is not physical pixels. It's uh, oh, I can't remember the term. It's not physical pixels. Physical pixels, because physical pixels, it does ignores your zoom on your monitor, right? Not your zoom, your scaling. So if you're of a high DPI monitor and you're at 4x or 2x, for example, it is 4x pixels. So 4x pixels. Now, I always get somebody that asks how to disable rounded corners because they don't like them. You can disable rounded corners. Here's some code if you want to disable rounded corners, and a blog post that links to a repository that has some code in it if you want to disable rounded corners. So you can do that. It's much easier once you download the libraries to do this with. But if you want to do it from scratch, there's how you can do it. The sample application that allows you to do that, and also can let you use small rounded corners instead if you prefer those. As a note, actually, I don't have a slide about this, but there are API calls you can use in Windows 10 if you want to add Windows rounded corners in Windows 10. So that could be fun if you want to do that. Color in Windows 11. Now, Windows 11 uses color to indicate visual hierarchy. It also kind of is simple. They don't have a lot of colors, but just a few colors. They specifically though, Windows 11 supports a light mode and a dark mode. So your application should understand light mode and dark mode. It should have the ability to adapt, and it should support both modes. A lot of applications typically support more modes, have more styles and more themes that the user can choose from, but it's a good idea to maybe have a light mode and a dark mode for all of those, or have an option. It's really popular. I see a lot of software that has an option that says, hey, should I always be in dark mode, always be light mode, or respond to the operating system, or whatever. So definitely something you want to consider in your application, because most users do expect, if they're in dark mode, they expect everything to be in dark mode. You want to use neutral colors and rely on accent color to emphasize important UI elements. Now, Delphi and C++ Builder do include the new Windows 11 VCL styles that are available via Get Package Manager, and they have a light mode and a dark mode, which you can see there. Windows 11 Modern Light and Windows 11 Modern Dark. If you want to detect if the OS is in dark mode, there is a library that's available that checks a registry key to see if it's in dark mode or light mode, and you can then use that to switch between the modes. There's also a blog post that explains how to check for it at runtime to discover if it changes. So if the user goes and changes it, you would get a notification and can change your mode. Again, you don't have to support that, but you should. It's a good idea to. And if you might give your users an option to override it, for example, but at a minimum, you probably really should, if you're not going to give your users the option to override it, you should support having both modes and automatically switching. So this is the example that can detect the system theme. We run this here, and it's determined that we're in dark mode, and so it's using the dark theme, but I can force it into light mode. When I hit check, it says dark mode is enabled. And if we go in here into display, personalization, there it is, Windows Dark. Layering is the concept of overlapping one surface with another, creating two or more visually distinguished areas within the same application. Now, it used to be really popular in older versions of Windows to use bevels and um, kind of the XP looking bevels to delineate different areas. But now with Windows 11, and you might not even be able to see that, but they use these very slight changes in color there with very slight outlines to indicate layers. And so instead of it being a section, they're trying to go for this idea of layers. You can use layers with the slight bit of a line on it. This is using also rounded corners on the layers. And you can also use a drop shadow, which we'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But your base layer is your app's foundation. It's the bottommost layer of every app that contains the controls related to the app menus, the commands, navigation. And then your content layers focus on specific areas of content, and anything that's in there is related. And so this is a way of grouping things together to create contiguous elements that have something that makes sense to the user. It's almost a skeuomorphic in that it's this idea that everything that's close together within that layer is connected. So elevation is depth of components and spatial elements. And so the idea is that different things should appear to be at different elevations. And so they have a list of different elevations there. The dialogue is in front of a window. So even though they're the same elevation, it is in front of that window. But then flyouts, or it's like a pop-up menu, would be at a smaller elevation, and you see the elevation continues to get down. Now they specifically called out what the stroke was on those, but all the strokes were one. In theory, they may introduce more different stroking um, changes for those, but right now they're all set to one. The buttons, though, control has got an elevation of two, but then when it's pressed, has an elevation of one. So that's that uh, having the depressed button that actually looks like it has gone almost flat onto the control. And then you see a layer has an elevation of one. So when a button's pressed, it goes down to as flat as a layer. Windows 11 has this idea of materials, and materials are just different visual effects that are applied to the UX surfaces. There's acrylic, which was in Windows 11, and it's very similar to the glass that was in Arrow. There is mica, that's new to Windows 11. Or sorry, acrylic was in Windows 10. Mica is new to 11, and smoke is new to 11. So acrylic is a transparent material, replicates the effects of frosted glass. Like I said, like Arrow. It's used for things that are only going to be there temporary, transient things that are dismissed easily, like flyouts, context menus, and such. Now, if you want to have some great acrylic effects, there's a few other examples of how to do this, but honestly, this is the best way to go with Delphi and C++ Builder is the Almeida Dev. Fantastic components, and there's a few examples over there. They actually go way deeper into pretty much everything we're talking about here can be done with those controls. But I didn't want to just focus on those controls. But I did think it was worth calling them out, especially for acrylic. There's two different videos there from Ian Barker, MVP, showing off how to do different things with the Almia Dev controls. Fantastic controls. They're style controls that they have. They have demos you can download and play with them if you want to. Supports Delphi 11 and C++ Builder 11 already. This is one of the samples from the Almeida dev that they ship that uses styled controls. I'll go ahead and run this real quick. Unregistered style controls. So this one you see is the acrylic background, so it's a little more translucent, but it's got a bit of the frosting going for it there. And we can change to different styles. And it has just some nice looking controls here. Just really looks really nice. The great thing about this is that it's very customizable, so you can get a lot of great effects going there. So now we can turn that off and get the solid background non-acrylic there. It's always nice to have a really nice set of controls like this that you can make a really beautiful looking user interface. Mica is a new opaque material. It's interesting because they say it's opaque, but then when I'm reading through it, sometimes it's described as being semi-translucent. So it's a little bit nebulous as far as how it should look. But the idea is it's that main form for your application used for your primary content areas. It's going to be subtly tinted with user's desktop background color, so it should have that response to the different styles. This is the Mica example from SourceForge. Go ahead and run this here. And I'm going to run it on the desktop. And so this is just slightly translucent. So you can kind of just barely see the background through it. And this is done through turning alpha blend on, setting it to 253 out of 255, so it's barely translucent there. And there's actually a component that's in development, but it's not quite finished yet, that you can just drop on a form and it will turn on Mica for you automatically. Smoke effect is used to emphasize important UI elements. So what this does is it dims the disabled controls. So when something's disabled, when it's out of focus, when it's no longer able to be used, you would dim it. So this is an example of smoke effect. So for example, if something's blocking modal dialogue, you would smoke the background. Here's an example in Delphi 11, and there's also the samples in C++ Builder for a smoke effect. And you see the background is dimmed. And actually, we tweaked it a little bit since I took a screenshot to get a little bit less dim in the background so that it's not quite as opaque, which is easy to do with setting a translucency property. This is the smoke effect demo here. This is the Delphi version. There's also a C++ version. I'll run this real quick so you can see it in action. We'll click Show Dialog. The button appears. The background is shaded. And it goes away. So the code in here on Show Dialog, we should enable the smoke effect, and then we display our modal dialog. As soon as the modal dialog goes away, it automatically disables the smoke effect. If we take a look here, the smoke effect, what it does is it creates a smoke form that has no border, and then displays that smoke form over the form. And then when the form is enabled or the smoke form is enabled, or sorry, activated, either is activated, then it just goes away. Okay, click on it, then it goes away, and it's back to normal. And we can tweak this by change if we want to make this, for example, darker. We could do that as well. Windows 11 overhauled the icons. They're continually evolving icons. It seems like as soon as you invest in a good set of icons, of course, they are now outdated and you have to get new ones. So if you need icons, there's a few sources for you here. The first one there, Icons 8, is a fantastic source. I really love this one. They have a number of free icons resources available for you there. The screenshot you see to the right is from there. Microsoft's GitHub. From what I saw, those are all the regular outlined icons. They don't have the colored icons, which I there's advantages to both. Sometimes you want the plain outlined ones, which is all the rest of these in the list are just the simple outlines. But sometimes you do want colored icons. And if you do want color icons, those are available through Icons 8. And the rest of those are free resources for um, outlined icons. Now, you'll notice a lot of these are SVGs, scalable vector graphics. I love scalable vector graphics. I've been a big fan of them for a long time. I'm excited that they're finally starting to get some major traction and get used a lot. And if you're wanting to use scalable vector graphics, there's a fantastic library for Delphi that's available here, Skia for Delphi. And actually, I don't remember if this works with C++ Builder or not. I believe it does, but I'm not positive. Um, Fantastic library. So if you're not familiar with Skia, Skia is a cross-platform library that was developed by Google, and it's used for my phone thinks I'm talking to it. Sorry, used for uh, Chrome, Google Chrome, used actually in Firefox as well. It's really becoming a very popular GUI library, two-dimensional GUI library. So Skia for Delphi is a wrapper for Delphi, bringing Skia to Delphi. And one of the things it includes is great SVG support. So you can take a look at this. It's open source. It's free. It's under active development. There's two brothers that are working on it like crazy, and they're always cranking out great new features and fixing bugs. I am really, really impressed with this library. Highly recommended checking it out. And Ian Barker, again, should have had Ian do this webinar because he apparently knows all this stuff. Did a webinar on using Skia for Delphi. He built the LCARS Star Trek user interface just for fun. And you can check that out there. And then there's a little code snippet of how to use Skia for Delphi to open SVG files. If you just want to enumerate and change your VCL styles at runtime, here's a simple example in Delphi. The fundamentals of it, the API calls that you're making are the same from C++ Builder, but the first thing you would do is in your form constructor, you just call the styles manager, which is defined in VCL styles, and you get all the style names, and you were adding them into a list box here or a combo box, and we just select the one that is currently the active style. And then as soon as you change the style in the combo box, we just change the style with a call to style manager. Now, if you want more information, a great place to start is the Desktop UX Summit. This was a free online event we held a few months back, and I'll call out a few sessions here. Evolution of Windows UI to Fluent UI, and actually I pulled some slides from this session from that session there, so you may see a little overlap, but he goes into different details and in different directions there. So check that one out if you want some more information on the evolution of Windows UI and Fluent UI. Also, we have Matteo Pagini. He works for Microsoft. He's done a few sessions for us in the past. Did a session on Fluent Design Systems, so you can check that one out there. And Zayed Alaga, and I'm probably mispronouncing his name. Hopefully, I spelled it correctly. Has a session on designing applications for Windows 11. So check that one out there. Where to go from here? Here's some links to the Fluent UI homepage, as well as the Microsoft Controls Library and Windows 11 Design Principles and Windows 11 Signature Experiences. Also, a link for the blog post that has the slides and all the links from this available for you as well. And with that, we'll go to Q&A. Okay, the echo there. For some reason, the system decided to unmute itself randomly, and I probably did something. So uh, anyway, so now but the replay will not have that going there. Are there, so the question here, if there are plans to have more Windows 11 components in Delphi without third-party add-ons, there actually is, I believe on the roadmap, I should pull that up. So that's always the place to go, is the roadmap for the official plans around things like that. If you check out, I'll pull that up real quick. I believe there are plans for that, but like I said, have to check the roadmap for sure, because yeah. So I'll just leave it at that right now without linking to it. So the question here, if the VCL supports. So actually, I will go back to that one. There will be more components being added. When they're being added is on the roadmap. That's a better answer. uh, so the VCL doesn't have direct support for materials, but those examples I showed were using VCL, so you can achieve materials just with writing a little code or using some of the libraries I provided. While there is semantic justification for smoke and acrylic, what's the function of mica? So, um, okay, that's a good question. Mica is the main material for the form, whereas acrylic is for pop-up menus, flyouts, uh, things that have a short that are dismissed quickly. So mica is the more fundamental material that sticks around longer, is the difference in use. Does the standard Delphi SVG, so the library, the Skia for Delphi library, Delphi supports full color SVG. Does support full color SVG. And excuse me, it does support, so Skia for Delphi supports full color SVG. I've not seen anything in SVG it doesn't support. I've tried a number of things on it. It seems to work quite well. So definitely check that one out for SVG support. So the links for the GitHub examples are on the blog post, which I will put a link in here for the blog post. They're on the slides. I will convert that into, or put more links in the body of the blog post as well. So the examples I showed were on VCL, but you can achieve most all of this in FireMonkey as well. Conceptually, the examples I showed were in VCL. So FireMonkey, of course, is cross-platform, whereas VCL is Windows only. So if you do want to have a cross-platform implementation, then you'd want to use FireMonkey. Now, from a semantic point of view, I guess, I'm not sure that's the right term. Anyway, conceptually, your Windows application should have the Fluent UI, whereas an iOS application should have the Apple design, and an Android application should have the material design. So those are different design languages, different aesthetics. That's the word I'm looking for. So you could do cross-platform and have it look like Fluent UI across all platforms with Delphi, but that's not the aesthetic that is recommended for those platforms. So there's a link here for a Win32 native dark mode. Interesting. I will take a look at that. To be an Giannis is saying he wants to refactor all his old app UIs. Glad to be an inspiration. Let's see. So Victor's saying he doesn't like that Windows do not have borders. Having to explore Windows one or the other is difficult to activate, resize them. Yeah, I have that same problem. There's actually some things you can do under accessibility options on Windows to change that. I don't like the disappearing scroll bars, for example, as well, which show up everywhere. So you can, while the focus of this was on the recommendations and the standards, I encourage you to make choices that create a better user experience for your users, even though they don't necessarily follow the standards. So for example, I mentioned a lot of applications let users pick if they want to always be in dark mode or light mode or follow the OS, or maybe have an entire different style available. So there's a number of ways um, to address that. Always, I think going for usability is more important than aesthetics, than look. A good UI UX design should include usability, and I think a lot of people forget that. What limitations do applications optimized for Windows 11 have under Windows 10? There isn't really. I don't know. I can't think of anything that I showed today that would provide a limitation. The rounded corners, if you're explicitly turning off rounded corners, they're not rounded under Windows 10. So, but if you are leaving rounded corners on by default, in theory, you're giving up a few pixels there. And so if you're displaying some important user information in those few pixels, yeah, they're very. I can't think of. I can't think of any practical limitations that you would run into. Let's put it that way. Video's blank. Oh, it stopped running. Let me turn on my camera instead, since the video has stopped. Oh, come on. Start camera. There we go. Hello, everybody. I got my new beanie. I really like it. I've never been much for beanies before, but I just got this one in open hardware. I love Arduino and stuff. Let's see. On which Window Terminal Server version is... I don't know that question. I'm not sure on that. Yeah, I'm not sure. Applications compiled with Fluent design in Windows 11, how do they present to Windows 10 clients? So that goes back to the other question. If you're implementing if you're calling specific Windows 11 APIs, which I don't think any of the stuff I showed is calling specific Windows 11 APIs, then those APIs either will degrade gracefully or give you back, not implemented on Windows 10. Then that would be the only differences. But if you are using, like, for example, that shadow or the smoke effect, that smoke effect is not calling a Windows 11 API. That's just implemented in the VCL. So you can have that smoke effect on Windows 10. And I think that smoke effect is a great way to provide that visual cue to your users, right? So they're not platform specific. So I would say 99% of what I showed you, examples, will work on Windows, not Windows 10 as well, probably Windows 8.1 as well. And I know there are some people out there that are still running Windows XP. We don't officially support it, but it probably worked there too. Nice background. Thank you. Nice hat. Yeah, I like the hat. I wasn't sure if I would like the hat, but I really like the hat. So the blog post does not have the links for the GitHub samples embedded yet. I will do that. Right now they're in the slides. You should be able to see the slides in there. It just takes some time for me to go through and pull those links out and add them to that. Uh, Actually, I did some research. You technically can do rounded corners in Windows 10, and I forget the API call. Maybe I'll do a blog post on that. Uh, it's actually did a blog post years ago about how to do a elliptical form in Delphi. It was like Delphi 7 time period, rounded forms and stuff like that. So you can do all that in Windows 10. So you could have those rounded corners in Windows 10 if you wanted to. So you could have your application look exactly the same between Windows 10 and Windows 11 if you wanted to. Now, there is something to be said for having your application aesthetically match the OS and the other applications on the OS. But at the same time, I think it's really great to keep your app refreshed and updated and looking good, even on older OSs, right? There's no reason you have to your users to have to upgrade to Windows 11 for you to give them some of the nice new features, nice new design characteristics. So there's a few questions here off topic. How to show weak numbers in the calendar view control. I'd have to look in DocWiki. I don't know offhand. Sorry. I did misspell Alameda Dev. Sorry about that. I fixed it. I'll fix it in the replay. Good resources for learning C++ builder programming. There are, so DocWiki, I'll put a link in here for DocWiki, is a great place to start. There is some stuff in there for that, but then there's also a YouTube channel, and I was just emailing him, and I cannot remember his name. It is, he has a lot of great YouTube C++ builder. I want to say it's like C++ VCL is the name of his channel. Yeah, VCL examples. There it is. So this is a great place for learning C++ builder. There's a lot out there, which I know is not, for me to just say it's out there is not very helpful, but I will point you to a few resources here. Let's see, there's the link right there. I'm just going to send you a link to DocWiki. There, I was trying to find these. There's a number of tutorials, so I was just going to try and find one, but they're just a lot here. So let's see. Here's another link there for DocWiki. So there's a question here about grids. If are using a grid, I would turn off the hard lines. They're not really doesn't really fit the current aesthetic. I didn't really get into grids in detail, but oh yeah, learn C++.org. Another great resource for C++. Oh, Developer Express. I am trying to read the questions while I'm answering questions. Oh, for grids. Yeah, turn off the, I didn't really get into grids. Turn off the grid lines or have the grid lines be a color that is just slightly different. So that's kind of the aesthetic is you don't have these hard, high contrast colors in the main area. You have slight contrast, but then you use accent colors for specific elements you want to call out, right? So you would have, just like a light, slightly different version color of the line, or you could do like the alternating line colors. I mean, the grid, for example, alternating row colors, but with no line colors. So things like that, you want to have follow the links to see some more of the examples from Microsoft for the Fluent UI, and I didn't see anything on grids in there, but looking at that, you can kind of see the aesthetic that they're going for and do your best to match that. Welcome. I'm glad. Thank you everybody for joining. I appreciate it. It's always I love putting these together and researching them and stuff and compiling it, and it's good to hear that it's well received and useful. So, Edward's saying, I'm glad to pay for icons. Do you have any resource or recommendation icons that I have to pay for? So Icons 8 has free and paid icons. I would check them out if you want to pay for them. I'm trying to remember other good resources for paid icons, and I don't recall them offhand. My beanie may be too tight, but Icons 8 is a good place to start. Will your presentation be available for download? Yes, if you go to the blog post, the slides are there, and I will have the replay there as well. And and links to the samples are working if you click on them in the slides. Okay, I think that's it. This is a full screen version. Yes. Replay will be available at the blog post and on our YouTube channel. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining, and I will see you all later. Take care. Bye.